Welcome everyone to another episode of the Wormhole. It's been a little while since our last episode. Today we got some extra special stuff. As you've probably noticed, there's now an intro song at the beginning here. I'm going to be working on coming up with an actual intro kind of video thing over time, so that'll be a thing. On top of all that, we're taking a look at a new game that I've actually been looking forward to for quite some time. This is Gauntlet. Now this is by Arrowhead Game Studios. They're the developer. It's published by Warner Brothers. And a lot of people have been wondering what's been going on with Gauntlet. It's a fan favorite game series that's been around for quite some time now, going all the way back to the original Gauntlet game in the 80s. The probably most recognizable and most popular one is Dark Legacy, which is for the PlayStation 2. And I spent countless hours playing with my friends and going through all that, and the phrase "Green Wizard needs food badly" is permanently ingrained in my brain. So when I heard that there was a new Gauntlet game that kind of came a little bit out of nowhere, I actually hadn't heard anything about it, and then all of a sudden they announced that it was coming out a month from when they mentioned it. I was a little surprised, skeptical, but also hopeful. And today it has finally hit these stores, so let's take a look at this. Now, of course, we're playing this on PC, and the game strongly recommends playing it with a gamepad. I can't say I completely disagree, but it does also depend on the class that you play. Each class plays pretty differently, which I'll kind of go over in just a moment. But first, I kind of want to just take a quick moment to look at what counts for progression in this game. Now, in Gauntlet, there was progression, there was levels, that you got gold, and you could spend the gold to get stats and stuff like that, but that was about it. This game, in a lot of ways, actually has less than that. The challenges, or masteries in this case, essentially make up the bulk of your progression. You have, for each class, so all these different classes, the Warrior, Valkyrie, Wizard, and Elf, all have their own challenges that you can do, and as you do them, you will earn bonuses. So for example, by completing this precision strike, my bomb can now be fired as an arrow when used while in aim mode, and I did that by killing 50 enemies with the bomb or sniper shot. So it seems like there's 3 that are unique to each class, and you have one that's general kind of category, one for each of the 3 major areas of the game, and then ones that are related to dying in some way. So the only thing that looks like it increases your damage at any point would be this. All these are tiered, by the way. No, not all of them, I should say. Some of these, like these, just go directly to gold because they're not going to give you stacking, take less damage things. But something like this, for example, is bronze, silver, and gold. So presumably you can get further increases along the way. I don't know how much it ends up being, potentially up to maybe 20%. It seems like the first gives you a large increase and then you get less each time. So I've played this already for only about an hour. Now, generally speaking, I would say that's probably not enough to give a pretty good impression on something like this, but the game doesn't have a whole lot of depth, really. And I think you'll see that a bit more when we actually start getting into gameplay. But the fact that this makes up the majority of your progression, you essentially just work towards doing your little challenges, and that increases your abilities along the way. So reducing the cooldowns of some of your abilities, getting extra gold from destroying stuff, and all that kind of things. And you have each of the classes has the exact same ones, with the exception of these farthest 3 on the left. And that affects your class abilities. So that affects basically how your actual character plays. So I'm going to jump back into my game here, and we'll go on to my elf, since that's the character I've progressed a bit with, so I can show you a bit more of the general game with that. And then I'll go over some of the differences on the different heroes. The elf and wizard are probably the 2 that are the most important to probably want to play with a gamepad, something with 2 sticks. Mostly because it's focused around doing a kind of twin stick style, especially on the elf. I almost called him a ranger. He's not a ranger, he's an elf. Elf is a class. Know your Gauntlet. So this is the kind of the world hub. So as you can see, this area here along the top is one of the major zones. To the right there's 4 doors to the other one, and on the left there's another 4 as well. And that matches up with the 3 different areas that you saw in the mastery section. So each of those is essentially the whole game. There's something else afterwards. There's some, I believe. No, actually there's not, sorry. I'm getting mixed up. I misread something earlier. So there's those 3 sections, that's the entire game. So it's not particularly long from what I can see. As I said, I only played about an hour. I went through the entire first section here. There's no boss so far. there is a boss for each area, but only at the absolute end in the 4th section. Each of these sections here, the first one ended essentially on this big kind of wave battle where there was a whole pile of stuff going on, and it was a little bit crazy. You do die a lot in this game, and you need to have skull coins to be able to resurrect yourself. Those you get a limited number of, and they're used when everyone on your team is dead simultaneously. So if you're playing alone, you may burn through them pretty quickly. If you're playing with other people, you won't. You can change the difficulty, which affects how many coins you have, or whether you even need coins. I believe easy doesn't take coins at all. So I'm playing on normal because the hard just sounds not as interesting, since this is already a pretty decently tough game. But I'll show you the other half of the progression system. It's this. So you have relics. So essentially on the controller you have left bumper and right bumper, which at first don't do anything. Once you've completed a bit of levels, you get some gold, and then you can spend the gold on one of these 10 items. There's also these, but these don't do anything as far as I can tell. They just look like they're pure customization for how you want your character to look. So these are the actual more important ones. So you get to take any 2 of these, and they do have multiple ranks, as you see over on the right side. So the Siren's Loop, for example, monsters ignore you during the duration. It doesn't tell you what the duration is, which is kind of unfortunate, but the 2nd rank heals everyone for a small amount every 2 seconds, and the 3rd rank increases that duration. So I'm using the Demonic Effigy, so I can summon a Demon Gargoyle to fight for me, and the Chaos Amulet, so it puts a Chaos Crystal that attracts enemies and then explodes, because you get surrounded a lot, and I feel like that is good, and this is just to have something extra to take some hits, or hopefully anyway. Actually, I haven't even used it yet to see what it does, but we'll see. So there's not a whole lot of character customization. It is a Gauntlet game. There's not necessarily going to be a lot of customization, but I'm a little surprised that there's this little, to be honest. This isn't made by a super huge team, but there you have it. So let's go into the level here. So as an elf, I have a few abilities.
The Legion awaits you.
The dead around here seem very partial to swords and shields.
I don't like the voice acting, especially the elf. The other characters are not as bad, but the elf's voice actors really kind of gets on my nerves. I don't really know why. So my main abilities anyway are right stick is a quick shoot on the barbarian and the warrior and Valkyrie. Right stick does not attack. You actually have to mash the X button and the triangle and Y. Sorry, I'm used to PlayStation now. These X and triangle to do your attacks, depending on what attack you want to do. And the right stick essentially is for an extra ability. So the Valkyrie has a shield that you can block with instead of an attack, so you're just defensive in the directions. And the warrior does like a charge thing that he builds up and then rushes through enemies. So I've also got on my B is a little dodge roll here. On some of the classes, in fact on most of the classes, that's more of a special ability. The Y and X do absolutely nothing on this character, which is kind of surprising. My right trigger gives this sniper shot, which does considerably more damage, but takes a second to charge up. And lastly, I have my left bumper, which drops this little bomb, and that explodes. And from that first ability that I have, I can actually fire it long range as long as I'm in my aim mode. So that's about it. So there's potions, as you can see down the bottom, along next to the key icon, just above the green health bar. As far as I can tell, those don't seem to really do anything. I'm assuming they're for something. Maybe it's something to do with the co-op. I haven't tried co-op to be able to say for sure yet.
These guys have really kept their gear in good shape over the years.
And there's a little bit of auto aim, which is a bit unfortunate, and I kind of wish that it wasn't there sometimes. At other times I'm glad, but a lot of the times it pulls things away. So there are certain items you can interact with, like these barrels. You can pick them up. There's cracks in this wall, so do the good old gauntlet thing and blow the wall open. Just deal with some of these. Have a bomb. I haven't played very much as the other characters. There's a little tutorial that you check them out. I mostly went with this character because it just seems to be a bit more direct. So there you go. I just got a potion. Oh, okay. So the potions power my artifacts, so that kind of makes sense. I was wondering if that's what they were going to end up doing in the end. I don't want to blow up all those barrels just yet in case I need one later on for a secret thing. There was an interesting level that unfortunately I wasn't recording for, where there was a demon, a death basically, was chasing me around and trying to murder me. And if he catches up to you, he just one-shots you, which is kind of a lame mechanic. I never really like it all that much when games do the whole one-hit kill thing. But, you know, they do have that. It's interesting too, at the bottom you see Skeleton Archer. It just faded away, but it says Skeleton Archer 200, 100% of damage dealt. That ties in with the classes and the masteries. Certain masteries, as you kill enemies, you'll end up upgrading your skill and make it so that you can furthermore attack more for more damage. So, traditional Gauntlet style, you can pick up this delicious turkey, or you can shoot it, eventually. And that's actually one of the masteries, is for shooting the food. There's one for picking up and eating food, and there's another for just shooting it instead of eating it, which is a little bit strange. And generally speaking, in Gauntlet, you don't really want to kill the food. It's supposed to be more of an accident. But in this case, if you accidentally kill food, you can get a bonus that makes it so that you heal a little bit of the amount that you would have normally healed from eating it. So that's kind of nice. You have a little bit of a back and forth, and it doesn't completely penalize you if you kind of mess up, or if you're kind of too into things and don't realize what's happening. Oop. Okay, I was wondering if that was going to open. So this is pretty much the bulk of the game. There are some more special, stronger enemies occasionally, some ranged enemies, some different types of guys, but for the most part this is it. There is the normal generators as well that you'll find in the Gauntlet titles, or at least the good ones anyway. So occasionally you'll get into a room that is blocked off. Unfortunately, they do rely too much, I find, on the trope of you're locked in the room until you kill all the enemies. I liked in Gauntlet Dark Legacy being able to kind of fall back to a more secure location at times and deal with them that way. The one thing I find that's kind of interesting as a design choice is that the elf, because I can auto attack by just holding on a stick, I can actually attack quickly, but as you can see, my attacks don't do anything to this unless I use my charged sniper shot or my bomb. So that's actually an interesting idea, because you can attack very quickly, so you're very good at mowing down lots of enemies, but you're not going to have a whole lot of success breaking the larger kind of spawners until you like take the time to focus them a bit more directly. Oops. Yes, they like to go on at length about that. Let's actually try my gargoyle. Oh, gargoyle's pretty cool. Just gonna go off on his own and do his own thing. I wonder how long he even lasts. Does he stay until he dies? If he's permanent until death, that's actually very good. Bomb in the middle of them. Oh, there he goes. So no, not permanent. So we'll finish up this floor to give you an idea of kind of the length. The levels are actually fair length. A lot of them seem to end kind of unceremoniously, though, in that there's not necessarily much to kind of signal the end of it, other than there's a door that all of a sudden you can leave. Yes, destroy the summoning thing. Oop. Now, one interesting thing is that your bombs do not take any kind of resource, so there's no reason to kind of worry about using them. Whereas in older Gauntlet games, especially Dark Legacy and the like, you would have a kind of potion system, similar to the potions that I have actually even now, but that would actually tie into your major crowd clearing ability. So you could actually use that to dissuade the enemies and clear a large area, but you were very limited in how many of them you had. Whereas this time around, you effectively have unlimited of your special ability. You're only limited by a short cooldown on it, and the actual abilities themselves that use the potions are from your equipment, which is in a way nice because you can customize it so that you don't necessarily have a wizard that only has a close range special ability and stuff like that, but you end up with weird other situations where at first you have no use for potions whatsoever. I just went through the entire kind of major first floor with no ability to use the potions. Let's get my gargoyle buddy out again. Oops. It really sucks when you miss those, by the way. Now, I also have that dodge roll, as I mentioned earlier, which is a lifesaver, because you can take very little hits, actually. Kind of a surprising little amount. Like, you have this decent health bar, there's food all over the place, but that's because if you get hit, you lose like a third of your life, at least as the elf. It's a little bit different on the other characters, but not to the point where you can afford to take a ton of hits. Obviously, the melee characters are tougher, because if they weren't, it would be completely ridiculous to play them, and no one would ever do it. But you're still not going to be kind of wanting to just stand there and trade blows with the enemies. I also strongly suspect that there are some exploits or something available in the title already, or people have figured out how to at least break the...
How did he get in here? He's turning. You're in for a treat now.
Look at that. How did
Whoa! Okay, so it looks like there's special enemies that kind of emulate some of the classes. That's interesting. So I guess this is essentially like a mini-boss, in fact. Get my gargoyle. Potions are not particularly rare, so I don't really see a reason to try and hoard them. Dang it.
So this is how we do it over in Elf Country. It's just like my mum said, evil sorcery won't get you anywhere.
Yes. The music has a nice quality in this game. I rather like it, especially the main menu music is pretty great. It kind of has, it's not like a chiptune, but it feels like it's a chiptune. I'll try and show it to you later on so you can kind of see what I mean. Okay, there's the thing over there. Drop that. And of course grab all the loot, because this is a loot-based game, sort of. It's based on getting loot, but not item loot, so it's not nothing like kind of like a Diablo game or anything like that. Although in a lot of ways this is kind of the predecessor to that type of game, as you might be able to tell by the visual style and the overall kind of layout of things. Oh no, I don't want to get hit. In the end I brought that for nothing. Well, no, ow. That is kind of actually a kind of dick move. Oh, this is not good. Save me, Crystal. Trying very desperately to not get hit, so sorry if I'm not saying all that much. It's a little hard to focus at times in this game. Especially now that they've added these knights. There actually had never been anything like that before, where I actually had to use specials as a regular against regular enemies. But it's good, at least it keeps you a bit more paying attention, and strongly encourages the teamwork aspect, because if you were to try and just ignore them in a group, it would probably not turn out too well for you. Delicious turkey. Not quite as good as wall turkey, of course, but this isn't Castlevania, so can't expect all that much, I suppose. It's a little annoying that sometimes you have to break the pots. I feel like it would be more beneficial if you could just walk over them. Alright. So, as you can see, the levels are fairly long, actually. It's quite a bit longer than I would have expected. Oh, I like the bomb enemies. Oh no. Shoot this a lot, get it done. Come on. The story of this is essentially non-existent if anyone is a big story fan. Gauntlet's never been particularly strong in its story. This is definitely not the exception. I think Seven Sorrows is probably the strongest story, which is not really saying a lot since that game didn't make a ton of sense in my opinion. But the story in this is essentially you are guys going into a dungeon for a reason. Go do the dungeon. They don't really kind of bury the lead. There's no real reason given for why you're there. Oh, man, that spawning is super annoying. One thing you have to be really careful of that I learned by mistake is that if you happen to pick up a key and you are in the middle of fighting all kinds of bad things and you accidentally get too close to one of the key doors, like the one just to the south of me here, you will accidentally open that door and make things infinitely harder for yourself. I don't know why I'm bothering to use my sniper shot on those. Oops, damn it. Sniper, there we go. So aside from this, I've actually been playing a lot of Destiny lately, which has been pretty cool. Don't know if I'll have a chance to do a video or anything of the like for it, but I'd like to at one point maybe. Those traps are a lot more dangerous for other classes since they don't have a dodge mechanic. Now, that enemy that had a crown on just now, I don't know if it was you noticed that. Oh no, I don't want to get stuck. I didn't really want to shoot the potion, but it explodes and kills guys if you do. But yeah, as you can see, my character's now wearing a crown, because of course he is. If you get hit while carrying the crown, you drop it, and if you carry the crown to the end of the level, you get a bonus. It doesn't seem to be anything particularly substantial, but it's extra gold. The gold, the only purpose for it is essentially a pseudo score, along with giving you the access to buying and upgrading the equipment in the game. And as I mentioned, the actual equipment itself is just the items that you can upgrade. You can buy the kind of customization things, but there doesn't seem to be any kind of stats or bonuses or anything tied to them, which is perfectly fine. It just seems like an odd choice to have a customization that uses the same currency as the only real progression system of note. Though I guess once you've found the relics that you actually want to use, there's not really much of a reason to bother doing anything else. You would just stick with those, and then you could spend on the customization that you actually wanted to do. The downside of the customization is it's all locked until you've progressed past a certain point in the story. So if you're just starting out, you actually can't really buy any of it because you have to beat certain areas of the game first. I'm gonna learn from Indiana Jones and not take that idol just yet. Yeah, that relic is definitely a solid choice. The general trick so far, for at least for as the archer anyway, has been to pretty much just circle strafe everything. Kill him, thank you. So there's 3 idols, gotta take the idols, put them on the thing, of course. Of course this is gonna spawn more guys. Now, I may sound like I'm not kind of appreciative of the spawning of enemies and stuff like that. I am. I mean, this is a Gauntlet game, that's kind of what I'm expecting. I would have honestly been very disappointed if there hadn't been a lot of enemies to go through and kill. That's kind of the entire purpose of this type of game. It's the type of thing that I think would be a lot more fun in the multiplayer. One of the biggest downsides is that there doesn't seem to really be much of an incentive to really ever kind of replay a level. While there wasn't much of one necessarily in the original Gauntlet games either, it felt like there was a lot more to find and explore. Now, it's entirely possible that I'm completely blind and missing tons of secrets. I'm not going to make any allusions to the contrary, but it just seems like there's not as much kind of open area. It feels very much like you're going down a linear corridor, whereas some of the areas in the other Gauntlet games were still linear but felt a bit more open. So this is the end of the floor. It will load directly into the next floor, but I'm not going to go into that. I'll go through so it counts as cleared at least. So this is what I was talking about. You see World Champion 1 player Kvant? That's a really large number, and every single level, the high score is owned by someone with a number upwards of the billions. So I strongly suspect there is some kind of an exploit or cheat or info duping or something like that that's going on. But yeah, that's kind of disappointing. Hopefully that gets sorted out. I mean, I guess it's possible that it's all legitimate, but the game has been out less than 8 hours at this point, so it's kind of surprising if someone's already got so much stuff there. And afterwards you go through this little count up here where it upgrades all of your various masteries along the way. And then it throws you immediately just off into the next level. As far as how the game is running, it's actually running phenomenally well. I'm just going to go back to the game hub here. During the games, even with a large number of enemies on the screen, I am getting on average on high graphical settings, so everything's maxed out. It's running at a pretty solid 120 plus. Right now it's actually dipped down to about 110. I'm not going to complain about 110 frames per second personally. I don't really have a huge problem with it. Obviously this video is not rendering at that, because that would be insane. It's only at 30. But it is a very smooth gameplay experience. I haven't found any kind of issues with that or anything of the like. So pretty solid gameplay wise. I wouldn't really expect it to have many issues, if I'm completely honest. It's very kind of basic. There's not anything super graphically impressive going on. But let me show you. Switch characters. So these characters, the Warrior and Valkyrie, are fairly basic. There's not really a whole lot going on. I'm going to show you the Wizard. This Wizard is a bit more complicated. I was kind of surprised during the tutorial. They kind of give you a brief thing and they don't do a very good job of explaining it. But if you ever played Magicka, you pretty much know how to play the Wizard. So by default, my right stick is right now a fireball. My two top buttons are absolutely nothing. In fact, actually, if I look at the control scheme, you can see the only buttons that do anything are the 4 face buttons. As you can see, conjure ice, conjure fire, conjure lightning. This is where I was talking about a Magicka kind of feel. So fire, I can do, if I hit just B once, I get lightning. If I hit it twice, I now have a lightning shield, which has its own cooldown. So I can't spam it like I can the basic double fireball. So that's just double fire, which is Y. Hitting XX gives you double frost, which shoots this beam, which is basically like the boss's ability that he had earlier. And this you can actually repeatedly do. It slows enemies when you hit them, but you can't move at all while doing it. And you can mix the elements as well. So if you do ice and fire, you get this, which is very cool. It also has a cooldown, but it's considerably less. If you do fire and ice, you get the same thing. No, you don't. Fire and ice gives you this cool little fire snakes kind of thing, I think it's called. Fire and lightning gives mortar kind of grenade things. So these have a very short cooldown and are a little bit more flexible, but they don't stop when they hit a projectile and hit an enemy because you're lobbing it, so it can actually go over them. Lightning and fire gives you this cool little flash shockwave thing. It's very neat. Lightning ice. It's chain lightning, but I guess you can't do it if there's no one around. And ice and lightning. There's a little dinkle ball here that slows enemies in the area, and I believe anyone hit by it does take damage, but it's a bit more of a crowd control spell. And that's it. So it's very different. It's obviously a much more advanced class. There's a lot more going on. You have to keep track of all your abilities and know which ones you want to use. And I think it's definitely going to be a class that has a lot of potential for kind of the speedruns. Getting things like the snake can let you move very quickly through areas and stuff, and works a bit like a dodge. And obviously damages things along the way. You have a lot of flexibility in terms of the types of attacks you want to use. If you're trying to kill enemies, or there's a wall of enemies and you need to kill the generator, well, switch to your mortars and lob it over all the enemies' heads while someone else deals with the close things. Something is now close by, well, now you got your little chain lightning or the little kind of blasts and stuff. So very versatile class, very complicated compared to all the other ones. I was really taken aback. I was used to playing a wizard actually in most of the other Gauntlet games. This time I decided not to at least start with it because I wanted to see more about what was going on in the game, but it's definitely something I'm probably going to be picking up when I'm playing in co-op with someone else. So that's basically been our look here. I'm not going to go too much further in terms of the gameplay. I think I've talked plenty on this. It's definitely enjoyable. It's a game I would strongly recommend playing with friends. It's heavily geared around enjoyment with your friends. There's a lot of kind of mixing things, and the classes play very differently. Aesthetically, there's a lot of kind of differences in the way their attacks all look and everything. The different relics and stuff are obviously geared towards having people with different loadouts to be able to kind of bring different skill sets, especially things like the team-based heal that you could get, as well as kind of the more crowd control based ones. So it's very flexible in that sense. Plays very well. If you like the old school gauntlets, it's probably worth checking out. If you aren't particularly interested in the genre, I would maybe recommend skipping it, or at least waiting until it's on sale. It is not a particularly expensive game. It is $20 on Steam, so you can definitely pick it up if it tickles your fancy. Otherwise, I'm sure it'll end up being on a Steam sale at some point. I think it's definitely at least worth a good couple of hours of enjoyment out of, especially if you have a buddy to go through it with, and you can get in touch through a voice chat. There's a lot of stupid situations that can happen, where your buddy will accidentally destroy your turkey that you needed to survive, and then you get one shot by some random mummy along the way. But it's definitely got a lot of good story potential. So that's it for our look into Gauntlet today. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll see you guys next time. Okay, I just found a secret boss. Well...